let's try to quickly define what is within the realm of this gzeira. I said several times, and I'll say it again, because again, this is a bit of a confusing sugya. So it's important to point this out over and over again and say, there's a thing called Shiur Yotot. You're not allowed to read Shiur Yotot for one of the three reasons we said, right? Because it's not Shabbosdik, right? Not holy enough for Shabbos. What's it called? Not Shabbosdik. So, not Shabbosdik. Other mitzvot tzacham dever davar. And the third is you might do a melacha. Fine. Now, beyond that, enveloping this, there's another layer of gzera shema, where we said there are several other things that are asur, lest you end up reading those things that are Shiur Yotot. Now, we need to ask, when we ask what is included in this gzera, we have to answer both questions, right? We have to say, what is included in the isur of reading Shiur Yotot, and what is included in the isur, lest you end up reading Shiur Yotot. So let's have a look at Rashi. Rashi, in one place, Rashi writes, Kol hane shemei ka Shiur Yotot shel mekach umemkal. So it only mentions business-related documents. The next Rashi writes, in Daf Kuf Zayin, Shiur Yotot gon shel cheshbonot o igrot hashluchot b'mtzo chefetz. And here he doesn't just write igrot, which we said could mean anything. Hashluchot b'mtzo chefetz, which has to do with what Ben was saying earlier, igrot that just informed them, hi, I'm alive, hope all is well by you, right? B'mtzo chefetz. So it's just interesting. Rashi seems to assume that the issue with igrot, even those kinds of igrot, which are not business related, are within the first part of the gzera, right? See what I'm saying? Shiur Yotot by definition are already encompass igrot shluchot b'mtzo chefetz. It's not in the second tier. Right, again, we said there are two tiers, right? There's the Shiur Yotot and there's the gzera shema Shiur Yotot. Rashi says letters are included in the first tier, Shiur Yotot. Right, it's surprising, right? Or the first Rashi? Well, you could say the first Rashi was just examples. Yeah, you're saying what about the steer and Rashi? I was trying to think of whether there's a reason in Daf Kuf Tet not to bother and Daf Kuf Vav yes to bother. It could be Daf Kuf Tet Zayin. I know, right?
That's when we talked about
Right. So what's interesting is Rashi. Where does Rashi say Shiur Yotot is igrot shluchot b'mtzo chefetz regarding Rabbi Nechemia in that context? Right. So the next step, right? So the first tier, according to in that context, includes correspondence, regular correspondence, and the second tier would be Tanakh, right? That's according to Yacholiyah that Rashi is only saying this to help you understand why Rabbi Nechemia was going so overboard. But Tosfot took this more seriously and rejected both. Tosfot said you're allowed to read correspondence. Not only is it not Shiur Yotot, it's also not in the gzera. And this Tosfot, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what he's doing because it's very strange. First, I'll read him the strange way, and then I'll read him the way I think that you have to read him correctly. Let's see the Tosfot. Correspondence. Tema. So first of all, it's interesting. Tosfot's, what's Tosfot's question? I don't know. I look around. I see people read correspondence on Shabbat, right? So that's how can you say it's usher? We see people do it. You can always say oilam goylam, right? You can always say that, but Tosfot doesn't go there. Interesting. Just saying. Right. Yeah.
Shita, his shita, Tosfot shita is often to look at the community as
I must
a
say that
representative.
the calls are this. I think this is the second time that the two of you have repeated each other right after each other. Yaakov said just now, Tosfot shita in general. Yeah, I know. When they say, but before I had a chance to say what Yaakov said, you
have to repeat it. I can't hear it.
No, but I didn't have a chance to repeat it. I was about to repeat it, and then you repeated it already. So, yes. So here we have Ben Yichabed Av, right? Where maybe it's the other way. Av Yichabed Ben. That repeated what his son said. The Seder. So we'll read Tosfot the problematic way. So what are Shitrei Hedyotot? Only business-related documents. אבל איגרות shari. Now, if we read this far, what do we say? Why are igrot shari? Why are you allowed to read igrot?
They're not called Shiur.
Because Shiur Yotot, right? That should be the reason. Only business-related documents, what are the correspondence? You're allowed. Why? Because it's not related to business, right? That should be the reason. That's not the reason Tosfot says. Depamim sheyesh ben pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh. First of all, you need pikuach nefesh to match this gzera. Not bad. I mean, right? It's pretty serious. You need pikuach nefesh. That's first question. Second question, really? How common is it? Even in their time. I mean, Tosfot, right? Tosfot, we're talking about, right, Europe in the Middle Ages. Not exactly fun times. But still, how often is it that the correspondence you're going to receive on Shabbos will be pikuach nefesh? No? How common is it? Is it that common? They say pikuach nefesh, even 1 in 1,000. Said there, but still, it's a bit strained and a bit strange, right? But third, what Yaakov pointed out right away, right? Tosfot say it's not Shiur Yotot, and then you're allowed to read it because there might be pikuach nefesh. Just say you're allowed to read it because it's not Shiur Yotot. Okay, but speak loudly so your father can hear you this time.
One option is that when Chazal decided what didn't draw the line too far because of that.
Okay.
Other possibility is that because it came from the question of the minhag, maybe that's why he's saying
I get it.
that's why we're not able to do that because there's nothing.
Interesting. Okay. So I think it's still your second explanation still requires explanation. Why didn't you just say it's not Shiur Yotot? Why do you still need the second, right? So one thing Yaakov proposed one way, which I think is the way I first thought the Tosfot was saying, that he says, L'chora, what Rashi is saying makes a certain level of sense. Why did we say Shiur Yotot? Why shouldn't Shiur Yotot include other correspondence? And you say no. There's a reason why Chazal say your business dealings you should let alone on Shabbos. Other things that might ever relate. Chazal already when they instituted this gzeira, they said there might be a time where this will be pikuach nefesh, and therefore we're not going to include this in the gzeira at all. But I want to propose a different reading. I'll remind you, the Tosfot say the whole issue here is mitzochet chava deber davar. So l'chora, you should be allowed to read the letters because it's mitzochet chava deber davar, right? According to Tosfot's shita, right? Why can't you read it? Because it's mitzochet chava deber davar, and if it's just a friendly correspondence, it's not mitzochet chava deber davar, and that's why it should be okay, right? I think Tosfot's saying something else. He's saying, first of all, it's not Shiur Yotot. It's not within the gzeira. Rashi says Shiur Yotot, he's wrong. But now you have another question. What about reading them alus gzeira shemek Shiur Yotot? If you're not allowed to read the labels on artwork, what justifies reading correspondence? So he says, even if once in a blue moon, there's a pikuach nefesh, we're going to allow it and say it's not within the gzeira. Again, according to Rashi, what? I'm not sure, but we'll try. Yes.
Tosfot is already throwing out the inserts. It's now, as far as he's concerned, it's gzeira to gzeira, and we don't do that.
Well, yeah, Levanti.
He's saying Rashi's wrong. There's no issue on this to begin with. So why would we have a gzeira?
No, but what you're saying is against the Gemara, right?
Well, I mean, but
Tosfot didn't invent this himself. Tosfot is relying on the Gemara. The Gemara talked about Gzera Shema, right? If you read this, you might read the next one.
Tosfot is disagreeing with that the Gzera would apply to the second one. It seems natural if he's saying that the first part is the Gzera.
What about reading guest list? But that's against the Mishnah. You can't say you can't That's why I think Tosfot need to justify the correspondence. Now, read the next line in Tosfot. Is very, 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 very strange line. But Yaakov thinks it disproves my reading. I'm not sure about that. Let's read it. Afilu yodea is amazing. Let's start from here. Igrot shari, you're allowed to read correspondence on Shabbat. Pamim sheyesh behem pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh, who knows? Afilu yodea she'eno pikuach nefesh, metir rabbeinu tam. תלא אבי שיטות יתות, כיוון שצריך למה שכתוב בה, לפי שיודע מה באגרות. ואם אינו יודע, שמש בצורך גדול, לפיקוח נפש ושערי. So he says like this. ממה נפשך? Do you know what it says here? If you know what it says, so big deal, read it. Okay? What? Okay. If you don't know what it says, maybe there's a pikuach nefesh element there. Right? It seems to me, first of all, it seems to me that Tosfot is only discussing the second level of the Gzeira in all this. Do you know what I'm saying? There's the first layer of the Gzeira being Zachat Tzachar Davar is definitely not, doesn't exist here. I hear. What was my reading here? Right. I need a Vav before the Vekevan, right? My reading was it's not Shishred Yatot, and now you might tell me there's a Gzeira Shema, but we won't have the Gzeira Shema not because we really think that every correspondence will include Pikuach Nefesh. We don't really think that's going to happen, but it's enough that it could happen sometimes to say that it will never make such a Gzeira. Now this is
it possible? Permit me. Is it possible that we're talking about a second reading? So you open the mail Erev Shabbos, and there's a Pekuach Nefesh, and you're so upset about it, you need to read it again on Shabbos because your mother is on her deathbed or whatever. But the first reading, if you understand that it's business, you don't pick it up on Shabbos a second time. We're not talking about opening an unopened letter because that would be prohibited. So presumably you already know the content.
So if I know that, that's an interesting reading. I'm not sure it works with Rabbeinu Tam, who says, so first of all, there's a sugya about opening the letter on Shabbat and how you can have a guy open it for you on Shabbat.
Okay, but that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue.
Right. So I'm not, but it does seem to imply there's a open the letter on Shabbat. Rabbeinu Tam seems to say, well, there are two situations. One is you know what it says and you know it's not business related, and then you could read it. The other option is you don't know what it says, and then you could read it because there might be a pikuach nefesh element to it.
Right, but as soon as you find out that they're talking about a shipment of goods, you keep reading the letter?
No, there I agree. No, there once you know that it's business related, then you definitely cannot continue.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a second reading, because if you think of every other sefer that we're talking about, that's a second reading. You know what the content of the book is. Interesting.
I have to see if what you're saying fits into the Rabbeinu Tam here.
Okay.
Beseder. But I want to connect the way I'm reading this with Yaakov's second suggestion. Right? I don't think that the Baalei Tosafot really meant that every single letter might be Pikuach Nefesh. Because how common is that? Right? This was very relevant, of course, this discussion came up, very relevant at the beginning of the Corona days when people were getting SMSs to go into bidud, right? To go into quarantine. So there were issues about, do we say that there's a far Pikuach Nefesh, and therefore you should carry your phone, you should look at your SMSs, etc., on Shabbos to make sure you didn't miss a notification about that. They're just pointing out. Now, there you can argue that there's a Pikuach Nefesh element because we know that we're dealing with a pandemic and who knows how it works, etc., etc. But so that's there. Here, Rabbeinu Tam says you're allowed to read any letter because it might have a Pikuach Nefesh element. I think that Rabbeinu Tam, again, the Tosfot is written in a way that's very hard to explain word for word. That's the truth. But I think what he's saying is this. I think he's saying we would never make a gzeira. First of all, right, he proves later on for the Yerushalmi, it's not within Shiur itself, But it's also not within the Gzeira Shemei Rashit Yotot. It's also not within that Gzeira because we can't create a Gzeira that will not allow you to discover Pikuach Nefesh, even if it's only going to be relevant in 100 years. We're not going to make the Gzeira now either, right? Even if it's only once in a century where the letter is actually going to tell you Hitler's on the rise, move now, right? Get out now before it's too late, and they have to know that on Shabbat, and you start fleeing on Shabbat, or whatever it is, the Pikuach Nefesh they're talking about. So we never create the second tier Gzeira. Now, just interesting, because Rashi is talking about the first tier Gzeira, right? Rashi says the Isur of Shiur Yotot includes Igrot, right? Includes just correspondence. Tosfot says, Tosfot, just a second, Tosfot says that the first tier only includes business documents, business-related documents. The second tier does not include anything that might be important enough to read on any Shabbos in the future. That's the way I'm reading the Tosfot. I want to read the last part of Tosfot to prove my reading. I don't know if Yaakov is going to be convinced, but I want to try convincing him before I hear Rav Baruch.
Before you get there, again,
yes.
Why did people send correspondence?
Okay.
This is in the medieval world.
Yes.
They wrote for business purposes, and they wrote for things that were very important. They didn't have casual correspondence, like, I just been to the Eiffel Tower and I wanted to show you, they didn't do that.
Postcard.
They wrote for what was really significant because they didn't write a lot. And somebody would often write for them. There weren't envelopes. They'd be paper folded up and then sealed. I mean, there's all kinds of things.
So I was debating this before. I was debating this before earlier with Glenn, where I argued something similar to what Baruch is arguing now, that they didn't have a lot of paper. Not everyone was very literate. It wasn't everyone was writing, texting everyone else, during Shiur like we do now, right? When something is really important, you'd send a letter. If not, you wouldn't. Glenn refuted this and said people want to know that other people are alive. It wasn't a luxury correspondence. Even though the paper was expensive, so you wouldn't write very at length, right? We have many Chachmei Chelm stories about that, right? About how
casual correspondence had the purpose of
right. Yeah, right. The casual correspondence, right? That's the all the Chelm stories of how to save, right?
Calls you make to your
how you
could my parents, every other day or once a week.
You have a casual conversation. What you're really doing is making sure they're there, making sure they're okay, etc. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I just want to read the last part in Tosfot to see if it'll convince Yaakov of my reading. Mihu, you see the last 3 lines over here. Mihu tan milchamot haktuvim bilaz. Let's ignore the ketuvim bilaz at the moment. We'll deal with that next week. Nireh l'Rabbeinu Yehuda de'asur la'ayen behem. D'lo gra me'adetanya ktav shetachat hatzorah v'duknot asur likrot ben b'Shabbat. So you're not allowed to read milchamot haktuvim bilaz. Whatever that means, we're gonna have to ask ourselves what that means exactly. What? So I'm not sure if like we're talking about a history book or we're talking about a novel or something like that, historical novel or non-historical novel or right. I'm not sure, especially based on the next line in Re says it's Moshe Vleitzin, reading Harry Potter. What wars are we talking about? Napoleon's or Voldemort's, right? I'm not sure which one he's referring to. But he is comparing correspondence with novels, right? And saying correspondence you are allowed to read because they're a Pikuach Nefesh element. Novels or historical novels or history books, whatever, are not, and therefore they're like Ktav Shetachat Hatzorah v'Duknot, which is Gzira Shemek Rashit Yotot, right? I think the comparison here is between that's what tipped me off. Maybe that's what he's referring to all along, saying the Shitrei Hadyotot are business, and then there's Gzira Shemek Rashit Yotot There, we're more lenient and say we're not going to add to the business documents anything that could have an element of importance later on at some point in the future. Therefore, it's not that every correspondence is like that. Even if not, you're still allowed to read because we'll never add such a thing into the Gzeira. And as opposed to history books, you don't have to read on Shabbos or novels. I'm not sure which one he's referring to. We're going to have to go deeper into that next time when you see the machloket about history and science books and the machloket about other reading material.